Since the beginning of film and video game collaborations, the connection between the two has been somewhat unpredictable. From numerous cash grabs to weird and off base, throughout the years there have been many attempts to convert fan bases of one market to the other, hoping big names and titles would trump dedication and effort, but ultimately leading to some all-time misfires in both mediums. Despite the numerous misfires and disappointments, amidst the records of failed adaptations, a select few examples have risen like beacons of hope. These standout successes have not only captivated audiences, but also elevated both mediums to new heights. They unearth hidden gems from their respective genres, shining a light on the potential for synergy between film and video games. In 1981, following the release of their instantly classic adventure film Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Lucasfilm production company needed a way to make their hit movie an even deeper staple in the hearts of their loving fans. This led to a partnership with a company known for venturing out into unknown territories, a company that had themselves pioneered the spur of the arcade machine just a decade prior. Atari's Raiders of the Lost Ark would begin production later that year, landing in the awaiting hands of Howard Warshaw, a lead designer at Atari, searching for a break of pace from his current role of porting older games onto the newer home consoles. And as fate would have it, the idea to make the adaptation came at the perfect time. Making the movie into a game was the perfect middle ground for making an original idea with a boost of popularity that would come from its original property. Warshaw had said, porting always seemed like an exercise in futility. So, with the blaze of creativity igniting his passion, he seized control of the project, eager to build upon a genre no one had before. Armed both with freedom to innovate as well as a solid foundation, he was driven by a singular goal of transforming the movie into a captivating gaming experience, feeling both undeterred and strangely inspired by the challenges ahead, as he embarked on a quest to capture the film's essence and translate its narrative into an interactive form. But he quickly found the journey was lined with obstacles he hadn't anticipated, and the biggest one of all was the shadow cast by Atari's own 1979 Game of the Year, Adventure, a game that had already tackled a similar concept just years prior. Adventure's story was based around a player going on a mission to find a magical chalice, doing so by moving through multiple levels and fighting enemies to complete their adventure. This obviously caused an issue with similarities in plot, but also, with how limited the technology was at the time, it would be hard to create something much different graphically or gameplay-wise. Howard, however, was determined. He decided not to let this discourage him, and he started his mission by meeting with the film's director, Steven Spielberg. The two would sit down to discuss a vision for the project, also allowing him to pitch ideas to Spielberg, hoping they'd be able to add original ideas to the game that could further the lore the film had already established, while also bringing some excitement to newer and returning fans of the franchise. Fans such as Warshaw himself.
The bullwhip belongs to another programmer who offers his version of what R&D, research and development, means.
This is what they call research and discipline in Silicon Valley, because you never know when people are going to come in and try and steal your trade secrets.
These are unusual people, creative but susceptible to burnout.
We give them a week off after they release a cartridge, just as compensation.
The game was released in September 1982, and ultimately became a roaming puzzle solver, where players would progress through different maps and combat level enemies, hoping to acquire an item from each level that would aid Indy in his retrieval of the Lost Ark of the Covenant. The game, however, would be released in mixed reviews, with some critics impressed with it as a dedication to its source material, claiming it was the adventure cartridge of the year, while others weren't so quick to sing its praises, noting the game doesn't quite live up to its inspirations and doesn't excel in excitement. All this, plus many of those inspirations, were also apparent immediately, it left critics tilted in the opinion it was a bad game. Luckily for Warshaw and Company, this fracture of opinion wouldn't show in the sales of the game, or with fans, as Atari's Raiders of the Lost Ark would go on to be a financial success, selling 500,000 copies within a year of being released and successfully kickstarting the genre of film adaptations in video games, leading to another partnership with Lucasfilms a month later, which would result in the infamous E.T., almost foreshadowing what was to be expected from the genre for years to come. The release of Raiders of the Lost Ark marked not only the creation of a genre within video games, but also a new strategy for companies looking to fully capitalize off their properties on a bigger scale. An adaptation created exposure to younger audiences, and allowed for other revenue streams for companies looking to create brands that could stand the test of time. And with exposure and fandom, some of the obvious mistakes may be overlooked by fans excited to experience their favorite film somewhat firsthand. But every movie wasn't meant to be made into a game, and not every team was as passionate as Warshaw's had been on Indiana Jones. Something both seen and felt as the market would become flooded with companies' attempts at adaptations, with only a select few breaking into the mainstream. The time between 1983 and 1986 became known as gaming's first market crash. Having just been established in 1972, the industry fell early into redundancy as the original games were becoming hard to find, and many fans decided to spend their money elsewhere. However, out of this downtime for games came one of the most iconic franchises in gaming history.
It's me, Mario!
Nintendo Super Mario Bros. Was released on Friday 13, 1985 in Japan, and had its American release just a few months later, where the game would launch with immediate success. In its local September release alone, it sold 1.2 million cartridge copies before selling 3.8 million more in the next 2 years, totaling a record of 5 million by the end of 1987. Critics and fans were excited by this new approach to the side-scrolling genre, commending the game down from its mechanics to its original story, slowly falling for the mustache men and their companions. So it wouldn't come as a surprise when, 4 years later, Super Mario Bros. The movie would be announced for release in 1993. Sadly, the tagline of the film, "This Ain't No Game," would also be a tribute to what fans would receive on opening night. The fantasy adventure film loosely based on Nintendo's gaming mega hit would immediately miss the mark on several vital strengths to those in attendance, as fans who had been enjoying the game for nearly a decade were blindsided. The 104-minute film ends up being one of the longest commercials anyone ever had to sit through, as much of its original story is stripped from its bones entirely, and instead, viewers are left with a mashup of movie genres that had been successful during that time period. The mystical tale of parallel universes filled with dinosaurs and mobsters can be only what happens when studios aren't too familiar with their reference material and have no respect for the actual source it all comes from. And sadly, to this day, Super Mario Bros. The movie is still held as one of the worst video game movies of all time, and was also the reason for Nintendo's relative silence on the front of allowing their IPs to be handled by other entities. The movie would have such a lasting impact that it was something that would only end 30 years later, with the Universal Pictures' recent adaptation. But this time, Nintendo had a heavy role of oversight, watching every moving part of the production and story that was shown to its fans.
You know every human being with a mustache wearing an identical outfit with a hat with the letter of his first name on it? Because I don't.
Bowser is coming.
Unfortunately, Although the first Mario film came with low ticket sales, and the fact that the movie hadn't passed its projected sales goal, it did only come in $10 million short of its original budget, leaving room for hope within a potential $100 million industry. The first game-to-movie project had sparked new interest amongst other video game companies looking to grow their audiences and capitalize off their market share, as gaming was starting to hit its stride as a popular medium once again, and the expansion of home consoles had completely exploded the space to newer heights. But, for the fans that were helping to build these budding franchises into long-lasting brands, they received only cheap attempts at marketing tools and half-finished products for years to come, as game and movie adaptations in either space would almost exclusively release media rushed and pushed through to fit marketing timelines and budgets, leaving a bad name for gaming adaptations all around. It would take nearly 20 years before fans would receive anything that could smoothly portray what it was that attracted them to their original fandoms in either medium, with the unsuspecting outlier crossover coming in the form of Angry Birds the movie. The Angry Birds franchise officially began on December the 11th, 2009, with its very first release hitting the iOS store during the rapidly growing religion of Apple and its line of smartphones. The then exclusive game of rocketing birds into the opposing structure of taunting pigs and explosives would become its own growing sensation, as it was on a fast pace to become the most downloaded freemium game of all time, putting the record to 3 billion downloads in just 5 years in 2014. The subtle charm of the game, with its on-screen characters, held an allure, and it had become a talking point in the culture that even someone's grandmother could immediately recognize. However, it would still come as a shock to many when, a year after breaking the record for most downloads and surpassing its previous 2 billion mark, an Angry Birds film was in production and set to be released in 2016. With a star-studded cast and the backing of 2 major production companies, the highly anticipated screenplay was released in May of 2016 and would earn $45 million in its opening weekend, ultimately going on to earn an estimated $351 million in the lifetime of its theatrical release. The flock of flightless birds were now soaring in a territory of their own, and had done what no other adaptation had before it, pleasing both sets of fan bases, while also delivering something that had perfectly captured the magic that had given it its fame to begin with. This marked a significant turning point in the realm of adaptations. Finally, the promise of delivering something satisfying to both movie and video game fans had been fulfilled. The success of Angry Birds the movie proved that it was possible to capture the essence of a beloved game and translate it into an entertaining cinematic experience. With this breakthrough, the floodgates opened for a new wave of adaptations. The Sonic the Hedgehog movie followed suit, winning over fans with the faithful depiction of the iconic character. And episodic shows, such as Arcane, Fallout, and Last of Us, continue to bring games to life for their awaiting audiences, as they've all been confirmed for their second seasons to much praise, truly showing the dynamic pairing between video game and movie adaptations.